Hello AP Biology students, this is going to be our first section in Unit 7. This unit is probably one of my favorite units to teach because we're going to talk about something called natural selection. This unit is going to be really focused on how evolution works in populations. There are a lot of sections in this unit, but a lot of these sections are a little bit smaller. Except for this first one that's a little bit longer, but the great news is I don't have my students take any notes on this section. I like to just go over this section and show the students that evolution was being talked about before Darwin. There's a big misconception that Darwin was the first person to come up with the idea of evolution, and that's just not right. How Darwin explained how evolution occurs was the most correct, and that's why he's remembered. But there were a lot of other people, scientists at that time, trying to figure out how evolution worked. With that being said, let's get started. Early on, scientists and just philosophers were trying to organize how life on Earth was connected. Plato and Aristotle in ancient history tried to classify life on like a ranking scale. And obviously they were not correct, but they at least were trying to group things in different classifications, which is taxonomy. Carolus Linnaeus is the founder of taxonomy, and he developed the binomial nomenclature we use to track evolution. But there was a debate among scientists at this time whether or not species could change. And Linnaeus didn't actually believe that species could change. He thought that species were fixed, they couldn't change. A French scientist named Leclerc came around and challenged this idea that life was unchanging. He proposed that species could change due to environmental factors, but he also believed in special creation, and he believed that the Earth was younger than 6,000 years. But a lot of his writings did influence Darwin, and Darwin even quoted him saying, hey, yeah, this guy definitely influenced how I think about life in general. Erasmus Darwin was Darwin's grandfather. He was a physician, a naturalist, and just scientifically educated. If you read this bottom line from one of his excerpts, you can see that he was tackling the idea that life was unchanging. So even Darwin's grandfather influenced his understanding of species and how life changes in general. Cuvier is a French zoologist who I really enjoy talking about because he is the founder of paleontology. He actually opposed evolution, but he also proposed extinction. And I know you're thinking like, okay, come on, how did they not know about extinction? Before this time period, people thought that if a species was here today, it was always here from the beginning of time. So proposing that a species that was there at the beginning could have went extinct and not be around today was a revolutionary idea. He also supported something called catastrophism, which is the idea that major events are responsible for physical features on Earth. These are like earthquakes, volcanoes, and floods. And yes, they do influence some of our geological landscapes. They are not the sole reason why things look the way they do on Earth. Two scientists that really influenced Darwin were James Hutton and Charles Lyell. These geologists really started this idea and concept of deep time. And not only that, they supported it with evidence. They showed that Earth's physical features were the result of slow processes taking long periods of time. This is otherwise known as uniformitarianism. Again, this is like saying gradual small changes that we witness today have always been here, and they are the cause of what we see in nature, what we see in our geological landscapes. I like that Lyell's book was outlined with the present is the key to the past. Now, Lamarck is another scientist that I like to tell my students about. He was one of the first scientists to propose a theory of evolution that could be tested. And Darwin read some of Lamarck's work and quoted him and saying he was influential with his understanding of evolution. Basically, Lamarck was really right in some things, but not so right in others. You can see here where Lamarck was right and wrong. Lamarck knew that the complexity of organisms has increased over time and that adaptations were the driving force of evolution. Where he got it wrong was the idea of use and disuse, meaning that organisms can kind of change their adaptations to better fit their environment. This diagram does a pretty good job of showing how Lamarck thought evolution occurred, where this older giraffe species had a smaller neck, but since it used it more often and elongated it or tried to get to the leaves at the top of the trees here, that it would actually grow a longer neck and then pass those genes on to the next offspring. And over a long period of time, you would get this long neck in the giraffe. Now, obviously, the idea of passing on acquired characteristics isn't correct, but it was at least a testable hypothesis of how evolution could work. Thomas Malthus is another scientist who I like to talk about. He studied human populations and how they were affected by resources. And basically, he talked about how the resources that we have, like food, water, shelter, are going to regulate human populations. As you can see in our graph here, there's a rate of food production that will increase, and subsequently the human population will also increase. However, at some point, there's going to be more people than there are resources available, so there's going to be competition for those resources. And that competition is going to lead to some organisms getting enough food and resources and others not getting enough food. That competition is going to lead to natural selection. This is another scientist that Darwin read about before coming up with his theory of evolution by natural selection, but was very influential on his thinking. I have to add this because I love this, how Lamarck thought giraffes got their long necks. Perfection.